Okay, today we got a fun project for you today. We're going to do a small little bowl like this. It's great for pills, your wife's or significant other's jewelry. In this video, I'm going to show you how to turn this by just using a faceplate without a chuck. If you have a chuck, that's great. Makes it a little easier. But I know some of y'all just starting off don't have a chuck, so I want to give you a little different project you can do without a chuck. Hi y'all, Mike Peace Woodturning. I'm passionate about woodturning, and I'm here to give you tips, tricks, and techniques to help you become a better woodturner. If this is what you're interested in, I'll get it right one of these days. Please click on the subscribe button. Okay, let's talk about design. For strength, grain patterns, and figure, woodturners almost always orient the bowl blanks with the grain running across the blank 90 degrees to the bedway. We might call this perpendicular grain. And that puts the grain on each side of the bowl as opposed to the bottom. If you align the grain vertically in a bowl, we might call this spindle orientation. That is, with the grain running this way, or what we call parallel grain. The end grain is going to be weaker at the bottom, so it might be easy to punch a hole in the base. There are always going to be exceptions to the rule, so let's look at a few. Sometimes you'll get a piece of wood that just says, hey, this is the way I need to be cut. Here's a cherry tree. This was the orientation with a bark, and the nature of that bark, the shape of the tree, it was hard to do much with it unless you turned an in-grain bowl like this with the pith running through the middle. Now, obviously, it's not a functional bowl, and it's split very dramatically because of the pith, but it did give a very nice, different kind of appearance. So there's one example of why you might use end grain. Another example of using end grain, now this is a hollow form. It's Norfolk Island pine with these radial branch eyes. And so if you have some type of pattern that is going to lay on the side that's around the edge of the bowl, that's another good example. Imagine this if this was removed, or we had it where the eyes ran right along the edge of the bowl with that feature. That would be another example. Here's an example of a small end-grain bowl my wife uses for pills, and here's another one that she uses for jewelry. So the first thing we're going to do is prepare a glue block. So I've taken a small piece of construction pine, and we're going to take our blank. It's got a nice smooth surface, and we're going to put some, we're going to use CA glue. If I'd had more time, I might use carpenter's glue. First thing we're going to do is use these number 12 screws and put about 4 of those into the faceplate. And we're going to mark the location for the holes first. Then I'm going to go ahead and drill these holes before we put the screws in them. And then we drill in the screws. Now we're putting it on the spindle. And we're going to face it off because we want to make sure we've got a nice flat surface. Alright, so now we got that. And I'm just going to spray a little accelerant. Now we're going to go ahead and mount it on the spindle. Then we're going to bring up the tailstock just for some additional measure. Now because the grain is running this way, this is basically a big spindle, I'm going to go ahead. Go ahead and adjust the tool rest some. Because this is uneven, we're going to take it down a little bit with a parting tool. And I think we're going to make the bowl not very deep. Maybe make the bowl. We're just going to depth drill it a little bit. Let's measure how deep. I have a mark right here on this drill. So it lets me know where to stop. I'm going to use a half inch spindle gouge swept back, and we're just going to slice with the fibers. I'm just pivoting this along the edge, letting the tool do the work. You can see we're getting shavings, not sawdust. Now to finish, I'm going to take a round nose scraper, negative rake, now we're going to shape the outside of the bowl. And I think I'm going to put a small bead right about here, just as a little feature. And I'm going to switch to spindle gouge, coming in with 90 degrees. I'm going to come in and just come in 90 degrees. I'm going to round over that edge, round over this edge of the bead, a little bit smaller. Now we're just going to double check the depth. So we're going to use a depth gauge. Sure the inside's not bigger than the outside, so we can see here's going to be the bottom of the bowl. I'm going to make a parting tool cut there. We're going to come in the back. I'm going to put a foot on this bowl. And that's a nice profile. I like that. Now we're going to go ahead and sand. I'm going to switch to a 2-inch. Use my sanding system from Woodturner's Wonders. Well, that's not going to do real well. I'm going to slow the speed down a little bit. I'm going to put a small base on this bowl. I think maybe no thicker than that. So I'm going to take a parting tool, come down a bit, turn the speed up a little. Now I'm switching to a 3/8 inch detail gouge. I'm going to take this back some. I want the base to be smaller. And I'm just going to make a cove in here. And I think it's still too big.
take a slight little undercut there. And I like that. It'll give it a substantial bottom. We don't have to worry about it breaking out. Got to do a little more sanding here, and then we'll be ready to part it off. Take another parting cut before I sand. And now we'll go back to doing just a bit of sanding. Slow the speed down a little bit. A little bit of hand sanding. Now I'm working pretty close to what could be a sharp edge there. So when you get that situation, you ought to go ahead and round it off so you don't accidentally slice yourself. Save you a lot of grief if you get in that habit. Now we're going to go ahead and part this off. I'm going to use a fluted parted tool, which will give me a very nice cut. Slow the speed down about 1,000. Lock my hand under it. And just undercut it just slightly so it'll rest on that outer rim. Now I could go ahead and cut the whole thing off with that parting tool, but for a lot of y'all just starting off, I would encourage you to get a thin flexible saw, like a Japanese flush cut saw, and do that final cut. And then just simply sand off the bottom. Of course, another way to sand off the bottom that I've shown before is with a Jacob's chuck with a drawbar. Make sure it'll be nice and tight. And then we just mount our turning right there. And then it will be very easy for us to use that to sand off the bottom. Catch the edge of it, get a nice radius. Start with a 180 grit. And of course, the main thing is we want to be able to sit flat. And we'll do a bit of a hand sanding, and then we'll be able to sign it. And there we have our completed bowl. All we need to do is put a bit of finish on it.
You know, finishing off the bottom is certainly, jam chuck is a great option, and I'll have a link to a video here to on jam chucking. I also have a link to another small bowl project, but with it cross grain or perpendicular grain, a small ring bowl, and I'll have that link here as well. Y'all stay safe. Come on back here.